Well, hi there, students. It's Mr. Verzette. This video is going to train you on the ideation process, or as I like to refer to it in class, the design process. This is the standard process that any designer uses in order to solve problems, whether you're an industrial designer, entertainment designer, graphic designer, or an architectural engineer. So let's get started. The ideation process, if we break down the word, just sounds like this: idea, shun, like the act of creating an idea. It's the process of developing or generating new ideas and solutions to design problems. And more specifically, it's how to take that abstract concept that doesn't exist yet and bring it into reality. There is a standard process to this, which is broken down into these 4 steps below. And I simplify this down to make it palatable for you high schoolers. That cycle is the first step, you define the problem. The second is you research solutions. Next, you develop and test your solutions, and then finally, you deliver your product. Broken down into those individual steps, when you define the problem, you need to identify your client's need and define the restrictions to your project. Restrictions would be, for example, if you're creating a bridge, those restrictions would involve, if it's a high wind area, then that will limit the type of bridge solutions that you can create. You would need to generate a bridge that can resist high winds. Or if it's a very long bridge crossing a large body of water, that will limit the types of bridges that you can implement into your solutions. For research, you need to fill your mind with all sorts of things that will help you study your problem. For an artist, that involves building references, also researching your client's history, their future, their goals, what's important to your client, your target market. You need to study the problem from multiple angles. And then after that, you start to test and develop solutions. You generate many different solutions. You filter them through which ones are most effective and which ones are not effective. And a lot of times we call this prototyping. You prototype potential solutions, test them, and then keep the ones that work. And then finally, you narrow it down to the one that really works the best, and you implement the strongest solution. That basically means you create the product. So visually, the design process or ideation process looks like this in my class. Step 1 is define, step 2, research, step 3, develop and test your solutions, and notice it's this wheel here, and then step 4 is deliver. The timeline for development usually happens in the earliest stages of the product. The reason for that is if you jump directly into generating a product without strong solutions to your design problems, it'll result in a very weak or non-functional solution. Oftentimes, beginner artists, especially in my design courses, tend to skip that entire process because they project their own understandings of drawing and painting and designing from what they do for fun onto this class. So they might be like, hey, I want to create a superhero with cyborg body parts, and they just go draw it, right? Well, that neglects this entire process, and this is the workflow used in the industry, which you guys will practice. So let's break each step down and apply them in different visual means here. So when you define your problem, in general, that means you receive this from your client, which is a client brief. It outlines specifically what the client needs and how they want it. Now, down here, because you're a student, I, as your teacher, provide you with the skills, the problems that you need to solve, and that down here would be techniques. For example, on this vector portrait drawing assignment, several of the problems that you need to solve are how to manage layers, how to control your anchor points, how to control the curves on your vectors. And so that would be giving you those restrictions within which to work to generate your solutions. Next, we research our client's needs, and regardless of what class you're in, this is one of the first things I almost always have my students do, and that's called a mind or a concept map. And so have you ever been in a situation where you just don't know what to create? You may have the restrictions, but you don't know the solution yet. Well, a lot of times, this tool will solve that for you. And this simulates the creative overflowing of ideas that come to a very creative person's mind naturally. It simulates that process for you. And so what it does is you choose a major concept. So for example, here it is energy. And then you branch off of that concept and you explore different aspects of energy. For example, storage, and then generation. And then you branch off of that concept and you try to think, well, what are different methods of storage? Well, you can store heat, battery tech, and such. Now, for you artists, in order to know what to draw, I like to apply what's called freeform association. What that means is this. Picture in your mind a red vegetable. Now, something just immediately popped in there, and you didn't have to think very hard to do that. That's what we would call surface level thinking. You may have thought of like a radish or a red pepper or a tomato, which is a fruit, by the way. So because there's no mental energy exerted there, this is great for generating visuals for something. So after you think of that fruit and that type of fruit or vegetable that comes up, now think red pepper. What comes to mind there? You might get all sorts of different images that come to mind. Branch off from those, all right? So red pepper, and maybe you get salsa. All right, now what comes to mind with salsa? It could be a number of things. Nachos, burrito, shiny, pain, fire, sombrero, all sorts of different things might pop in. And that generates a large amount of raw material that you can use to try to get visuals. This is also used to see connections between things, to have a global view on the way, for example, how energy works. The next thing that we do in graphic design, we call this a mood board. In entertainment design, we call this a visual library. And what that is with your restrictions and an understanding of what you're going to do, you then start to generate visual references to fill your mind. And so what you're doing is you're going onto the internet, or you're getting your own photo library, and you're amassing a large amount of photo references onto a document that has your restrictions written down onto it. And you're studying. So you're studying form and function. You're trying to see theme and culture. You're filling your mind with a wide array of visuals to help you come up with an idea. Now, you're not copying any of these in your work. There will not be a single image on your mood board that is going to be relatable in your finished product. You're simply doing this just to generate ideas. Now that you've got all of your research in place, now we go to the meat of this process. This is the funnest process for a designer in general. This is where you come up with a wide array of things, you test them, you get rid of the ones that don't work, you keep the ones that do, and you constantly revise it until you get a good product. What that looks like as you, the designer, would be prototyping, thumbnail generation. It's your mind on paper. You're pinning down a number of things: composition, form language, layout, and so on. Oftentimes this process, and I go over it in many other videos, this process is lengthy, meaning you're going to create a lot of small little drawings that are not seen by anyone except me, your teacher, and yourself. And these are just to help you get to your solution. It's kind of like showing your work on a math problem. What you do is you take the things in each thumbnail that are working and roll them into future thumbnails, meaning your weakest designs will be at the beginning and your strongest designs will continually build up and evolve once you get to the end. So here are thumbnail form studies for potential creature designs, and these are the individual parts that work, and I'm throwing out parts that don't. Here are thumbnail studies for a logo design, and it wasn't until I got way down here after all these generations of drawings that I pinned down my logo design. And so some of the restrictions for this one was children, flight, freedom, and fun. With these types of abstract concepts, it's essential that you have a wide array of thumbnail studies in order to pin down the visual communication for this. And so finally, once we get to the last stage, we deliver the solution. We implement the product generation. And so what does that look like? Well, that means you create the art. You sculpt the sculpture. You paint the painting. You build the poster. This is the part that the artist gets to. It's the whole reason why they are creating. And if we break down a visual of the entire thing, just for review, and in your notes, you, again, define the problem and your restrictions, right? From here, you then research solutions by generating mind maps and a visual library or mood board. You develop and prototype your solutions through your thumbnail sketches, and after refining it, you get to a solid sketch and you implement the solution. Here's a sample of the ideation process for a portion of a beginner student's lab. Now for this lab, they were to generate a whimsical, kind of surreal chair by choosing an adjective and designing a chair to fit to that adjective. So here's the adjective, and here are a variety of different webs that, or web elements that the student has generated here. So they know they have to make a chair, they know they have to pick a colorful descriptive word, and then they've got a lot of visual raw material to select from here, all right? So there should never be a chance of me hearing in class, Mr. V, I don't know what to create, or I don't have any ideas, because this solves it for you. And here the student was to make 4 thumbnail sketches of potential chairs. This student did 6. And so then you see the students thinking on paper. Down here, you see a lot of different ideas that they're exploring, color palettes that they're exploring, and then of these thumbnails, they will choose the strongest, and that will be one of 4 of the chairs they will total design. So just to give you kind of a look at this process, all of this is submitted and attached to the finished work. It also gives the layman the chance of looking behind the scenes and seeing what goes on in design, the process of finding a solution. Because a lot of times all we see is the finished art. We rarely ever get to see the process behind the art that gets to that solution. And it's a fascinating process. And really, it will make your work stronger. So I hope you found this helpful, students. I look forward to seeing you in class. Bye-bye.